Okay, so I've had this screen up while we've been waiting, so some of you might have already had a chance to sort of look through it, but I thought I'd just set an agenda just so that you're all aware of what we're going to be covering today. And so what I'll be starting with is sort of starting from the broad and getting narrower to the actual offerings and how realistic they are and things like that. So I'll start with everything that Microsoft has to offer in terms of licensing program options, and then I will narrow that down to discussing the ones that RM will be offering, looking at some of the new licenses and the ways in which Microsoft are allowing you to license for your students. And then we'll go through some specifics about the different licensing programs before finally going on to how realistic is this new student licensing method, some cost comparisons and a bit of a caveat on the cost comparisons. That's the information we've got right now. With some of the licenses, they're not going to be available until next year, and so that price might change, but we'll go with what we know now. And then finally, some just a couple of recommendations for just to try and get a sort of idea as to how you might use some of these new licenses. Okay, so as I say, these are all the options that Microsoft offer for education. I'm hoping that most, if not all of them, are familiar to you. OVS probably being the most commonly used. WebDirect is just direct from Microsoft, and you don't tend to benefit from many education discounts with that. And I think you need a credit card as well to use WebDirect. And EES being the 1,000 full-time employees or greater, and in fact that's changed to what's called knowledge workers, but we'll discuss knowledge workers a bit later on. And then finally CSP, which is the cloud solution or cloud services provider licensing model. And again, I'll go into a bit more detail for those that aren't aware of what that is as we progress through the slides. The key thing, I guess, to mention here is that OVS, so these are the new education bundles and licenses that Microsoft are offering. The key thing here is that for a lot of the new cloud-based licenses, OVS doesn't have that availability, and so an alternative will need to be looked at. So in light of that, this is what RM are able to offer. So we are both a CSP licensing partner, and we're able to license through OVS. And so when we start to look at some of these new licenses and bundles, that's the important thing, is that we can offer them to you. It's just going to be through CSP rather than OVS. Another important thing to mention is, although OVS doesn't have as many of the cloud licenses available, it does still have all the same, for want of a better word, legacy licenses. So like your desktop packs and server licenses and all that sort of good stuff. So don't fret, you can still get all those licenses. I'm just not going to be talking about what already exists. I'm just going to be focusing mainly on the new stuff, because what already exists, I'm hoping most of you will already be familiar with. In terms of CSP, what that is so some of you again may already be aware of this, but for those that aren't, CSP is trying to, it's a new billing methodology in that you have two billing relationships with CSP. So the first billing relationship is between Microsoft and the reseller, so us, so Microsoft and RM. And then the second billing relationship is between RM and the customer. The big advantage for schools with this is that we know that you generally prefer to purchase things annually rather than monthly and varying costs monthly. And so with a lot of these cloud bundles, Microsoft like to charge monthly, and they like to charge on consumption and usage. So what we're able to do is smooth that out for you by having that separate billing relationship with yourself. So we can charge you annually, however Microsoft can charge us however they like, quite frankly, and we don't mind. So that's just I suppose the most important thing to remember with the CSP is that we can translate that bill into anything you like, really. If you do want to do monthly, then we can certainly work with you to do that too. And then as we go through, I'll be highlighting some of the things that you have available through CSP licensing, because it is largely around cloud licenses. It's that's what the C is in CSP, is cloud. But there's also other things. So where with OVS you had a minimum commitment to the 5 full-time employees, or FTE, as I'll be referring to it from now on. With CSP, there is no minimum commitment. So if you just want one license, you can buy one license. And it's also flexible. So if your user count changes throughout the year, you can adjust it. And that's because Microsoft bill monthly, basically. So they allow you to adjust it up or down depending on how you want to do that. So I won't be going through every single line of this, and I won't be explaining. Basically, it's not product training this, so it's just about licensing information. There is a hyperlink at the bottom there, and in fact, if you just Google compare Office 365 education plans, you'll get to that. That's probably the easiest way of doing it. But the key message that we're trying to get across here is that the free product still exists. So what was Office 365 for Education, they've just renamed it to A1. And then what they've done is they've created these bundles. So the Microsoft 365 A3 and A5 options. And within those bundles are what Microsoft see, and to be honest with you, what I see as well as being the core components for cloud computing using Microsoft products, and that is Office 365, EMS, which includes things like Intune and Active Directory premium plans and some security features as well. Windows 10 too, because you need an OS, and then Minecraft Education Edition as well. And then A5, from what I can tell, it seems to be more advanced reporting and security analytics, and there's a bit of cloud PBX in there as well, so communications. And so it seems to be just improving, going one step further with security and communications. Essentially, the A5 edition is. The pricing in the bottom left is the one that they've shared with us so far, and they've only shown it us in dollars, which is helpful because the exchange rate seems to regularly change at the moment. But later on, I have converted it into pounds and an annual price just to give you an idea, and that was based on an exchange rate I think a month ago, to be honest with you. But hopefully it should be okay to use that just to give you an indication of pricing. So what they're doing now, so before it used to be pretty much unlimited student usage for Office 365 products. What it is now is that they're doing it on a ratio, and that actually exists as well with the desktop packs as well. So with some of the legacy licensing, and so as we go into the more specific licensing schemes, OVS and CSP, I will show a slide on the ratios, and the different products have different ratios essentially, and that's just I think it's just a change to so that it's not unlimited, because I think they may have felt that some schools, of course not you guys, but some schools might have only been buying 1 or 2 licenses and then giving it to all their students, and so they're just trying to put some sort of limitation in there, I think. But we'll look at how realistic it is, and just a sort of a sneak peek into that. I think it is quite realistic, actually. I don't think you'll be bitten by the ratio, so there's nothing really to worry about too much. They say there's relevant $0 SKUs, but in actual fact, I can't see any, and I think they've probably changed their minds on that. What it seems to be is that when you purchase a qualifying license, so say Office 365 A3, on your Office 365 tenancy, there'll be a box underneath that says for students, and you'll have the relevant ratio of how many licenses you bought available to distribute out to your students. So I don't think you do need to ask for a $0 SKU anymore, but we'll certainly keep you up to date as to whether that is the case or not when it comes to purchasing these licenses. For students that want to download the software or the eligible software onto their own devices, this is something else that that Microsoft went to a bit of detail on in terms of what you can do. And the main thing here is that you don't really need to do anything. All you need to do is give them the web address to this Cavuto website, which is at the bottom right there, and the students can go on. They can find your school just by searching for it. I think it's by postcode or by name, and then it will show them a list of what software is available to them. So whether that's Windows 10, whether that's Office 365 Pro Plus, whatever that might be, and then they can just download it for themselves and install it on their personal devices if they so wish. So that's how you can provide them with their own sort of home use licensing, and that hasn't actually changed. So it's still up to 5 devices, same as it was before. So that's the same. Okay, so we'll go into some more sort of specifics now around OVS first, and then we'll go on to CSP. So the first thing I want to say about OVS is that the way in which you license OVS and sort of calculate all that is completely unchanged. So nothing's actually changed there. It's still FTE. The only thing that will continue to happen is that the prices will continue to increase. That seems to be the way in which Microsoft are doing things. So it's likely we'll see another price increase in June this year. And the main changes being that, as I already sort of alluded to before, that the Office 365 and Microsoft Education licenses aren't going to be available in OVS, so you need to get an alternative way. They say at the bottom there that Windows 10 Education A3 and A5 aren't available, and although that's true, it doesn't mean you can't get Windows 10 OS licensing through OVS. It just means those specific SKUs and those specific packs aren't available, that's all. So you can still license Windows 10, just not with those two specific user cases. Student use benefit. So we've already sort of discussed that it does exist with this, and it's based on, so the ratio is based on the FTE count. You still need to purchase the qualifying products the same as you did before, whether that's a desktop pack, an OS, productivity suite, or CALS, I think was the final one that there was. So nothing's really changed there. They have said that the list of qualifying products is extended. I'm not really sure what. I can't remember the exact list before, so and you guys might be better on this than I am. But when we look at the student use ratio, I'll be able to share that list with you, and you'll be able to. The more keen-eyed amongst you might be able to spot the extended list or whatever. But yeah, so apparently they've extended the list of qualifying products as well. And so here is that extended list. And you can also see the ratios. So for example, the desktop pack is a 1:40 ratio, which means every 1 FTE 40 students are eligible or licensed, and so yeah, that's the main one. EMS might be another one that you might be looking at, and again that's a 40 ratio. The only ones that are 50 that I would think you might be using are things like Advanced Security Management or Office 365 Pro Plus, and they're just a slightly lower ratio. It seems to me that the bundled products, or the largest sort of products in terms of what they offer you from a licensing point of view, offer a 40 ratio, and the sort of bolt-ons, you might want to call them, seem to be the ones that offer a 15 ratio. And then across on the slider to the right, you can just see what that offers your students in terms of functionality, and there shouldn't be too many surprises there. And if you buy the Azure Active Directory Premium Plan 1, funnily enough, the student gets Azure Active Directory Premium Plan 1. It's it's pretty self-explanatory, hopefully that is. So just to summarize on that, there's not a huge amount of changes in OVS other than the new products that are coming out, some of which aren't going to be available. We'll move on to the cloud solution provider program, and we'll take a quick look at the licenses that are available there. So the first thing is I'll just show this summary slide again, just so that you can see that comparison between the different licensing programs. You will notice there are 3 stars next to the Microsoft Education licenses, and the reason for that is because Microsoft have delayed the release of those packs to CSP. So it says FY18 at the bottom, but from what I've heard from conversations I've had with our contacts at Microsoft, it seems to be around April to June sort of time when those licenses will be available. And so, yeah, if you want to buy the individual ones, then those are available right now. But if you want to wait for that bundle pack, then yeah, it's going to be next year before we can offer that to you. And so I mentioned earlier, very briefly, admittedly, but about knowledge workers. So you'll be familiar with full-time employees. Knowledge workers are Microsoft's new way of licensing these new cloud products and bundles. And I've been trying to think of an easy way of explaining what a knowledge worker is, but essentially it's somebody that needs to use or needs to have access to one of the paid for education platform products. So if a user is, say you've licensed all your users using your desktop pack, so they've got all their on-premise access and all they use is Office 365, then they could be classed as a light user, and you could offer them just the Office 365 A1 SKU, which is essentially what you do now with Office 365 for education. If it is that they need some of the security features, or they're being accessing Windows 10 devices from Intune that have been configured by Intune, then they would fall into a knowledge worker category. So that's really what they are. And then the student use benefit, it relates to the number of knowledge workers you're licensing. So again, students still get access to Office 365 A1, so they still get the free access to that because it's a free product. But if you want your students to have access to, again, some of these paid for applications or licenses, then it's done on the ratio of knowledge workers that you've purchased against that. Microsoft did mention that you can buy student, you can license it from students as well, but your knowledge worker count's always going to be lower than your total student count, and so I don't think that you'd ever want to use that option. But we do have SKUs if you do want to buy them for whatever reason. And so again, just another way of visualizing what I was describing on the last slide. Basically, if you have users that fall into either the Microsoft 365 A3 or Microsoft 365 A5 blue box, one of those blue boxes, then they are classed as a knowledge worker. If they only need to access the tools that are available in Office 365 A1, then it's free and they're classed as a light user. With CSP, they've what they call special use rights. So they've given a sort of nod to some of the things that you might need to be able to sort of complete the picture in licensing terms, and this is what they can offer. So if you buy Office 365, then you'll get the CALs that relate to the productivity servers, so such as Exchange, SharePoint, or Skype for Business, if you're still using any of those. And then EMS, because EMS is more related to security and device management toolings. Then again, the CALs that they offer for on-premise is around those sort of things. So Windows Server, advanced threat analytics, there we go, get my words out, SCCM, and System Center Endpoint as well protection. So you get some CALs that will allow you to manage those things. And if you buy the 365 bundle, then of course you get the first two. And they've just said that there's a bit of a negative bit, but they're saying you're not allowed to install productivity server products. So what they are the Office 2016 products. So you can still install Office 365 Pro Plus, just not the local version of it, perpetual version, I suppose you might want to describe it as. And you can't downgrade your Windows 10 from the one that you've purchased as part of the Education A3. So that's just a couple of things just to be wary of if you are looking at those licenses. But the key thing here is that you can still license some of the core things that you'll need to license on your on-premise network. One omission from that is that you will still need to buy your server licenses. So although you get your CALs, you'll still need to buy your server licenses from another licensing platform, probably OVS. And again, here's a kind of similar slide on the student use benefit. The only addition there is the Education 365 packs. So they have a 1:40 ratio as you'd expect. And so everything else is fairly similar, I think, compared to the CSP one. So we'll move on to how realistic these ratios are. And what we did, we just took sort of average FTE counts from the schools that we work with, and from some government statistics as well. And of course, these are averages, so your school might be above or below these counts, but it's just to give you a feel for the sorts of numbers we're talking about. And then what we were able to do was split that between teaching staff, SLT, support staff, and etc. And so that's where I took the knowledge workers from. Again, that might not be entirely accurate because your school might have a different makeup in terms of staff, but it's just to give you a sort of nod towards the fact that your FTE, you might have a higher number of full-time employees, but some of those staff might not actually be classed as knowledge workers. That's more what it's about. So that's why there's a discrepancy between the total FTE count and the total number of knowledge workers. And then if we look further along this table, you can see the ratios that the numbers of students that would be licensed or eligible for licenses using these. So if we're talking about knowledge workers, then for primary schools, it might be that certainly on the 1:15 ratio products that you might need to top up licenses to ensure that all your students are licensed, but certainly beyond that, it seems that the ratios seem to work out pretty well, and that if you were to license all your knowledge workers, then you'd be fine for your students. And the same is true for FTE as well. It seems to be fairly realistic, to be honest with you, but of course I'd welcome your feedback on that if you disagree with any of that. And just a note, so again, if you think actually no, we've got more students, even if we did license all the knowledge workers, we'd still be under license for students. I would say that it's go with the least number required, whether that's if you've only got one student that you'd need to buy for, you're one under, then buy a student license. I suppose that might be the use case for the student licenses, but generally speaking, just top it up using knowledge workers or full-time employees, because then you'll take advantage of that ratio. Yeah, that's what I'd do if I was under licensed. And then there's the conversion that I mentioned before in terms of what that price translates to for Microsoft Education packs. So it's around £4.36 per month, which equates to about £52 for the A3, or £8.15, which equates to £97.80 for the A5. And that's, as I said before, is per knowledge worker, not per full-time employee. And so we'll just take a quick look at how these different options compare. So on the left, we've got the new education, and I'm doing it on A3 just so we can be consistent in terms of what we're looking at. And so if we take that £52.32 per knowledge worker, you'd get some CALs and you'd get Pro Plus for local installation of your productivity suite. And then you'd get all of those extra features within Office 365, EMS, Windows 10, and Minecraft Education Edition. And so if we then translated that to what many of you are doing already, which is it's purchasing desktop packs through the OVS scheme, well, current pricing for that, and this is list price. I don't know what price you are actually transacting it at, but that's £57. So that's already more than what the Microsoft Education Pack is. And then if you wanted Office A3, it'd be an additional 22, EMS £34, Minecraft for Education is £3.96. And so where you'd end up is, if you were to take all of these options, is that just looking at the bits that are involved with Microsoft 365 A3, so discounting the desktop pack, it's more to buy each area individually than the bundle, which of course you'd expect. But also as well, if you can get away with using the CALs that are included within the Microsoft Education bundle and the 365 Pro Plus, then it's also cheaper to do it that way through Microsoft Education 365 A3 than it would be to buy the desktop pack as well. So just a bit of a nod to that it might be worth in the future, depending on your use case, of course, looking at this new bundle to see if it works out better for you. And again, at the bottom, I've just put a note in there to say that I am acknowledging the fact that you still need to purchase server license, but with either pricing model that I've put up there, it's not including servers either way. So my recommendation still remains. It just means that you'd have to look elsewhere for a server license. It might be that you buy perpetual, or it might be that you buy continue your OVS licensing with it, or something like that. And then the final bit I wanted to cover before we open it up for some questions is our recommendations. So I'm not expecting you to read all this or necessarily digest it all. We will make the recording available and the slides available for you afterwards. But really what I wanted to do was sort of highlight where I think most schools are probably at, which is School A, where you've got an on-premise network, you've got a mix of Windows 7 and Windows 10 stations. You've migrated to Office 365, but mainly for mail. You're not really using it for much else, but your plans are to continue that migration of Windows 10 over the coming year, and you've got longer plans to migrate your users to Office 365. And so in that scenario, I would remain with your OVS licensing for the desktop pack and server licenses, and your and using what is now Office 365 A1. But when we get towards June next year, if you started to use Office 365 more heavily, and the number of stations that you've got on Windows 10 is you've managed to move them all across basically, then it might be worth at that point starting to look at the education bundles as an alternative to your desktop pack, because you will get that on-premise licensing in terms of CALs and Office 365 Pro Plus, but you'll also get the added security benefits gained from things like EMS and the Office 365 A3 or A5 editions, which are going to be really important for ensuring that your students and staff are safe when they're using Office 365 tools. So that's what I'd recommend there. If it is that you're further along that line, and you've actually got you're starting to look even at things like Windows 10S, and you're starting to have a mix of Windows 10 domain joined and non-domain joined. You've still got an on-premise network, but you have a mixture of domain and non-domain joined, and Office 365 is already quite heavily used, then I'd probably look straight away at these education bundles. I know I'm saying they're only available next year, so you're still probably going to have to do it next year, but I'd start looking at them now and working out whether you can move across, because of course your Windows 10 devices will be all licensed. You could look to use Intune. So for those that don't know, we are running a project on Intune and Intune for Education at the moment as well. So we'll be able to support you with that for those non-domain joined devices. And if you were wanting to look over next year, when you come for device refresh, you're starting to look at these lightweight Windows 10S devices to replace some of the full fat clients that you might be using currently. Then again, Intune for Education could be used to manage those too. So that would be my recommendations, and I hope that I've not confused you all too much, but please feel free to ask me any questions that you may have.